Are you sorry? We're just about to start the meeting, so I'll call you in when we're ready, okay? All right, thank you.
You ready, John?
I do,
Want to call to order study session, St. John, June 21st, 2023. Jenna, roll call, please.
Robert Burleson,
Here?
Yolanda Cardona. Here. John Gill,
Here.
Joe Gomestego,
Here.
Bob Valois.
Here.
Jenna Lordson here. John Kennedy is absent. Attorney Adam Decker,
Here.
Engineer John Dykstra,
Here.
Councilman Liaison Brian Blazak,
Present.
and Town Manager Joe Wazawadi.
Present.
First item on the list, item A, Martin's Commercial Edition Lot 9. Proposed amendment to building elevations, creating a two-tone all-brick building at 10845 Poplar Place, St. John. Jeff Brandt is the petitioner. Hello, Mr.
Yes.
Jeff.
My name is Jeff Brandt. My office is at 5201 Fountain Drive in Crown Point, Indiana. I'm here tonight to request a change of the site, the exterior materials at the corner of Poplar and, was it Parish, that was approved, I think, a year ago. And all we're doing is changing some, we want to go all brick in lieu of the LP board, or, so that's what we're requesting tonight.
What's the colors of the brick? You know?
I'm sorry. I can provide you with a color of the exterior brick that we're going to use.
Okay.
I didn't bring it tonight, and that was not a question asked to me. But we're doing, we're having another product on the fascia and soffit, which will try to meet all of your requirements for the overlay district.
Yeah, why I asked was just color two, so I wasn't sure what color two
Well, these
was.
this is what the architect provided. This is
Yeah.
originally, we'll probably, I can provide you with the color of the brick that we've picked for the exterior, if that's required for the meeting.
That's fine.
It's all around, right, from backsides?
Yeah, it'll be all brick. We think it's a better material. It's less maintenance. It's just a good product. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
You guys have any questions?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any issues. Anybody have any issues?
We're checking with Attorney Decker to see if he needs to apply for a site plan amendment, or if this is something that at the regular meeting, we can kind of just all come to a general consensus of it.
Minor
So,
amendment.
yeah.
Well, we're not changing the site plan at all, so it shouldn't be part of a site plan amendment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I've looked
We're
at,
not really changing anything on the site plan.
yeah, Mr. Chair, I've looked at our town zoning ordinance, and based on the fact that it's really, I guess, a change in the exterior to all brick, I don't think it requires any formal, I guess, application for amendment to a site plan. I do think it should be approved by the Plan Commission, but I don't think it requires a public hearing or any kind of notices that be generated. So I think it would be appropriate for the Plan Commission to consider it at its next regular meeting if it's an agenda item, and then simply vote to approve that change.
Okay.
I have no problem with that, and that's a really good decision.
Yeah.
All right, do you have any more questions for me or anything?
How much longer do you think the construction phase of this is going to be? Just curious.
Well, we're moving along because the weather's been very cooperative. I'm assuming they're putting the roof on. I'm hoping in about 2 months, we should be, the only problem is that sometimes there's certain materials in the construction industry that are very hard to get. And dealing with NIPSCO could be a real pain in the, it's very difficult too to get power and everything to your property.
Should have been here earlier. We had a meeting with them.
Pardon? No. They're on their own schedule.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. We'll see you at the next meeting.
All right,
right,
thanks,
thank you.
Mr. Brandt. Next item, West 93rd Avenue and US 41, proposed site plan and sidewalk waiver from STJMC 21A-33D2 to install 6-foot wide sidewalks instead of 8-foot wide along the southwest corner of West 93rd Avenue and US 41.
Evan Lavalette, First Group Engineering. As we spoke about a couple weeks ago, we plan on proposing 6-foot sidewalks along most of the project. On the west end of the project, we'll be tying to the existing 5-foot sidewalks. We can't meet the 8-foot condition that the ordinance is due to the right-of-way engineering on this project. We only bought right-of-way from one parcel, and to have bought, we would have had some pretty extreme damages, especially on the east end of the on the eastern part of this display. And on the western side, we would have had maybe some normal damages, trees and stuff like that. But the cost would have started to jump up there. And right-of-way, no right-of-way engineering was one of our constraints on this project. The one parcel we did, we kind of jumped the schedule and got it pushed through and to make sure it could be in time for this project.
So some of it, the sidewalk will have green space, and some of it will be along the curb?
As you get to the western edge of the project limits where the magenta is shown, there is going to be a little bit of a parkway on that south side, and then the parkway on the north side really won't start until the little section where we jump off the back of curb and tie into that existing sidewalk that's there.
And the two cyan color existing sidewalks, those both are 5-foot?
Yes, those are the existing 5-foot sidewalks.
Is this waiver for sidewalk on 41 also? Or just 93rd?
It's just on 93rd.
Okay.
Yeah, on the north end of that area, we're really kind of threading the needle with easement rights and then literally taking more property from the homeowners. There's just not enough,
It's not enough.
there's just not enough right-of-way.
Okay. Guys, got any questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
July 5th is the next meeting.
Yep, yeah, that'll be the public hearing.
Thank you all.
Where are you going?
What?
Oh, no, we don't need you for that. Go away.
No,
What is it? I can stay?
No, it's for the impact fee. I'm like, wait, that's not you.
no, that's not him.
Go away.
You didn't know that, did you? It's a new surprise.
Next item, item C, Park Impact Fee Zone Improvement Plan and Park Impact Fee Ordinance. Proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan to incorporate a Park Impact Fee Zone Improvement Plan and recommendation for adoption of the updated Park Impact Fee.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so we have David with Structure Point on via Teams here. He has a PowerPoint presentation just to go over with you guys. So, David, whenever you're ready.
Yes, so can you guys, please, if you can't see me, you can see the screen that has St. John, Indiana Parks and Recreation Impact Fee Study. Are we seeing that now?
Yes, I'm trying to get your volume adjusted here so everyone can hear you.
Yeah, just let me know when.
Sure.
I was
Hold
like,
on just
he'll
a
be here
second
in
for me.
Just a moment.
Just, Jason's coming.
I think it's
He's just coming out of the back
wrong
here.
speaker, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that happened to me the other day.
There you go.
Ah,
All right, try again, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Sounds like a
Oh, yeah. I'll try to speak low now then,
Nope,
instead
you
of
can speak
instead of high.
loudly.
Okay, all right, good. Can you see the PowerPoint slide that I've got? It says the Parks and Recreation Impact Fee
Yep.
Study? Okay, great. So what you're looking at right here is a map that was prepared through your previous Park and Recreation Master Plan that shows the location of all your existing parks. So this is kind of what, anytime we do a project, we look to see what your existing conditions are, and we start with that. So this is a project between ourselves at American Structure Point with two different groups in our company, but the architectural group, which is led by Dan McCluskey, and then my group, which is the Planning and Economic Development group. We also have a sub-consultant on this project that's Synergy Sports. So it's just me tonight, but at your next meeting on the 5th, Matthew O'Rourke, who is the group leader of the Planning and Economic Development, will be joining you to give you a more in-depth kind of analysis of how the impact fee was calculated. But for tonight, staff wanted me to kind of give you guys a primer on just what the impact fee is for those of you who are maybe relatively new to the Planning Commission, haven't been involved in this process before. I understand that the city's had impact fees in the past, but it's been a couple years since one of these processes has occurred. So just wanted to start with, okay, what is an impact fee? Well, it's a one-time charge placed on a permit at the time of permit issuance. So basically, it's a fee that is put on for a developer to have them cover the indirect cost of the impacts that their product or the development produces. So what this is not, a lot of times, is people think that this is a tax maybe paid by existing residents or future residents. That's not the case. Common examples of it, obviously the park and recreation for your park and recreation facilities. You also see a lot with stormwater and road impact fees as well. So as part of this process, Indiana State Code has a pretty set list of things that you have to look at and that you have to do. One of those is creating what we call a zone improvement plan. So that's the planning document that we're currently working on finalizing, that we will be delivering that to the city on this Friday. We've got everything that we need into the document today. We're just working on some formatting, just making sure, that we've got everything, the T's crossed and the I's dotted, so to speak. But we're in a good place to deliver that on Friday, and then you'll have that before you at your next meeting. There's a significant amount of data crunching that goes into this, and so that's why we wanted to kind of give you a precursor tonight on those things that aren't the data crunching, and then we'll get into that the next time. So prior to your meeting, we'll have an impact fee committee meeting at 6 o'clock. The last thing I want to mention about this is that this is a process that's required every 5 years. So 5 years ago, there was an impact fee, a similar project that occurred, and so we're not starting anew, but the thing for you to know is that, and as you know, there's been substantial growth in your community. So with this, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the staff. Michael O'Shea had done an existing facilities inventory, and that was real helpful in our work to we were able to take that, expand upon that, look at some of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act things that are required. So this is just kind of an example of one of the parks that you'll see in this zone improvement plan, and just kind of get you used to there's a large section that has that existing inventory. Some of the things we've been able to do is create what I call a legal compliance template that's for your future ordinance fee updates. Like I said, this is a pretty arduous process to make sure that all the legal requirements are taken care of. And the other great thing about this is it's really the first steps in creating an update to your town's parks master plan. You do have a parks master plan, but it's been a number of years since that's been updated. So we're really the work to do this zone improvement plan gets you about 25% of the way to that document. So that's what we've had in the back of our minds as we're creating this is we're not just doing this for the impact fee, but we're setting you up for that Parks Master Plan. So I've talked a little bit about the existing facilities review. This is the document that Michael O'Shea and his staff was able to get together. And so again, we want to thank him for doing that. After we move from the existing conditions, we're always looking at, okay, what is the growth going to be, and what are your planned trails moving forward? Of course, the amount of planned improvements that you have obviously is directly there's a direct correlation to the cost, and looking at what that impact fee cost will be. One of the big things that factored into this is a map from your latest comprehensive plan. But, one thing that was interesting when I was speaking with staff, and we'll talk a little bit more about the community center facility that's in the works, but right now that facility, or one of the places that your staff's looking at for that facility, is kind of on the southern edge of the community. But if you look at it from a whole, if you look at where the city's projected to grow to the south, it really might be in the very center of the community. So that large amount of expected growth is something that we really looked at as we've been calculating what the fee exactly will be. But there's going to be a substantial increase in residential uses. This right here is what we call a future land use map. It's different than the zoning map because it's just looking at what the possibility or the likelihood would be of the zoning moving forward. But as you can tell, and as you guys know from what you're seeing there on the ground, there is substantial growth that is occurring. So that is the one big factor in this process that really wasn't looked at 5 years ago, because you're now experiencing that growth. So I wanted to move on to a little bit of Dan's and his group's process with the facility design. They've been looking at exactly how large this should be. This is part of that design. They're looking at like a potentially a 3 basketball court facility there, and then the internal facilities. I'll let them talk more in the future about the design of that, but I did want to let you guys know that is what we're looking at as far as a larger facility. You have a lot of what we call neighborhood parks today, but not a real large location for a big city facility. And so this is kind of what it would take size-wise to get to that. We're really looking at about 7 or 8 acres there, just because of the amount of the building space and field space that would be required. So, and then just to talk about what that can be used for. It could be used for a variety of things, not just sporting events. You could have trade shows, community events, corporate events. Definitely just a gathering place. But with the amount of growth that is expected in your community, this is definitely, by the projections we've got, it's definitely something that can be very feasible. And so with that, we've calculated that into our fee analysis. So I just want to give, in closing, just to show the project schedule and where we're at. I'm working on the actual impact fee ordinance. I was actually doing that right before I called in. I'm probably going to be able to deliver that tomorrow morning, if not tonight, and then we can make sure between staff that we've got everything we need to have in the packets, not only for the planning commission meeting, but also for the town council, the official adoption that would come up. So again, Matthew O'Rourke will be in person on Wednesday, July 5th, to really present the nuts and bolts of the impact fee and the calculation and where we got to the number that we got to. But again, this is the schedule that we've laid out. I will also be virtually attending the July 20th and July 26th to ensure there aren't any questions with town council. But with that, I've just opened it up. If anyone does have any general questions, I'd be happy to take those at this point.
So do you have a amount, what you're projected, the
It's
fee
gonna-
first, or is that gonna be something presented to us on July 5th? Do you have something in
That-
mind now, or?
Yeah, I will tell you that we're still kind of finalizing the exact number. So I will let Matthew O'Rourke discuss that. But what I will say is, because of the amount of growth and the amount of needs, the number that we're projecting is going to be a substantial increase from the previous one. It has historically gone up, but it's definitely going to be a little bit more of a jump. If I had that final number and I had the document completed, I'd be happy to share that with you tonight. We did put a number out for the purposes of public notice, but we're still kind of fine tuning that. I will know for sure this coming Friday. But I can tell you that the number that we're looking at is going to be is going to be a jump from where it previously was.
What is that
Now-
number? What is that number now, David? Do you know?
Oh yeah, it's I think it's about let me actually, so I don't misspeak. Let me go back and look. I can find it in my information here.
We're looking for a rough figure.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
nothing that we're gonna, can't put your feet to the fire. Would just give me a rough figure, because substantial
thinking, Joe?
could be $20.
Yeah, no, I-
100, it's relative speaking, so.
Yeah, so the impact fee, right, the last one was $1,868.
1868.01.
Yeah, 1868.01 in the last one, and we are looking probably at an increase of at least $600, maybe even higher. It could be up to around. It could actually end up even doubling. So it is going to be an increase. Well, actually, I don't think from that it probably won't double, but it could go up to about 3,000. But again, we're still fine tuning the final numbers there, and I don't. So I can't give you an exact figure tonight.
Okay, good information. Yeah, my question was community center facility, and you got that one, so that was the only question I had. You guys got any other questions? Nope.
Not right now. Not right.
David, did you hear back from Ms. Bennett with respect to the first, considering on first reading and then adopting on second at the same meeting? I had not heard back from her.
I think that is a possibility, but I believe it has to be unanimous.
Right.
Is what I understood from her. I think that is
Because
still a possibility.
I think our council president is leading to just having the one meeting and not having the
the dual meeting.
The Thursday,
yeah.
the 20th, yeah. Because we're actually considering having the special meeting / study session on the 12th, which is the same night as the plan commission, apparently, which would be having a special meeting to approve the minutes.
That would actually work better for our schedules.
Yeah.
Both Matt and I potentially had a conflict on the 20th, and we were going to work it out, for one of us to be here. But my understanding from her was that if it was unanimous, it could be done,
Right, I
but
think
it
she was
had
trying
to be unanimous.
Trying to get clarification on that to be sure. So
Okay.
I just want
Yeah,
to
I don't
follow
think-
up with her on that, because the
Okay.
council president wants to do it on the 26th and do it all on the 26th. And if it doesn't pass on first reading, then they can defer it till August. And that was his
Yeah.
feeling on the matter.
Okay. Yeah, well, I would double check with her. I think what we left with was that she felt that she thought that could be done, but she was not 100% sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's what I recalled too, David.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I was waiting to hear back from her on that. So I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if she'd reached out to you on that, but I'll send her a message just to follow up on that.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, yeah, just let me know on that, and I will be sending you and others at the city the impact fee ordinance. If there are any minor changes you want to see, please let me know, and then we'll be getting the zone improvement plan to you on Friday by close of business.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Can we have
Any
this-
other?
Can we have this sent to us? This presentation, or did you send it? This-
I
Yeah, you
need-
did send it. Never mind.
Just sent it, yeah, a little while ago.
Yeah, no, I remember that. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I did send
Yeah.
that earlier. So, just because, and just to, on that number, I want to go back to the question you guys had because I want to be clear. I was trying to think through it in my head, but just so everyone knows, yes, the existing ordinance today is $1,868.01, and it could go above 3,000. How far above 3,000, I am not completely sure because we need to finalize that. But we will have that finalized number for you on the 5th.
Do you know of other impact fees in the area? What neighboring towns? If they
Sure.
have one,
There
and
are-
are they? What are the
Yes.
amounts?
That is on the higher end of the scale due to the amount of growth you have. You're not at the absolute highest on the scale. I believe there's a community in outside of Indianapolis that was about at 4,000. But so you're not. You are on the higher side, and that is a political decision as to whether you want to have that high, but based on the data that we have, and gone through the state process, you can charge at that rate, and I think that's the best way to think about it.
All right, very good. I have no other questions. Anybody else? No? All right, good job, David. Thanks for the
right.
presentation.
Well, thank you very much, and I will be dialing into future meetings. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Next item, Suncrest Church, propose amendment to the Gates PUD to allow a second church/place of worship and 2 proposed commercial buildings within a portion of POD pods 3, 7, and 17, approximately 290 feet east of Park Place and US 231. Please state your name and your address.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Jamie Ward with Suncrest Church. Nathan Viss is our attorney and actually is at another meeting. So would like to request, could we move forward to the next item in the agenda and then come back to us after that final agenda item? Is that possible?
That's it.
You have a problem?
No.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we're good.
Thank you very much.
Next item, amendments to subdivision control ordinance. Propose amendments to the town's subdivision control ordinance. Jenna, you're probably on the hot seat.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time I can give you guys, but so you got the 4th revision, I believe it was last week. Sergio really just kind of wanted me to tell you guys that we need to look over it. We hopefully need to get some feedback from you guys, whether you see typos. I don't know if we haven't heard from anyone since the last meeting as far as any changes. I think there were a few minor changes maybe that you submitted, Bob, or Bobby did, one of the two. But I know those were made and sent out last week, so I don't know where you guys stand with reviewing this, if you had any further thoughts on things that you wanted to see changed. There was some verbiage in there, I know, for plat committee as well. I don't know if anybody reviewed that, but just looking for feedback at this point, if there's any.
John, did you want to talk about the situation with NIPSCO and the conflicting logistics and stuff like that?
Yeah, I could bring that up. Yeah, so we had a meeting with NIPSCO today in regards to NIPSCO changing their operations and bringing the gas and electric mains into the front yard, which now we're seeing a lot of conflict when homes are attempting to hook up their potable water line and sanitary sewer and or the storm sewer if that goes out the front, where now the plumbers are having to cross across an electric main and a gas main in order to get to our B box, which the town maintains the B box forever. So then in future years, town employees would have to service the B box, which is nestled between a gas line and an electric line, which I don't think is very good for anybody. So we had a meeting with NIPSCO, and we're attempting to figure out how we can kind of jockey the things around in the easement to give everybody enough room to get their utilities in, but then still make it where nobody is on top of another person's utility, and or the people have enough room to work and maintain and service and repair what they need to without any significant dangers to them from the other company's utilities. So I know one idea we talked about was, and I think it would come in the subdivision control ordinances, when the developer puts in the utility, if they put, this is actually Bob's idea, but if they put a piece of copper into the B box and extend that back beyond the NIPSCO easement, then later on they could just hook onto the copper and not have to transverse across the gas and electric line, because it would already be further up in the yard. Or we even talked about moving the B boxes back, but again, then it's kind of tricky where the B box is usually right where the right of way ends, and then that's where the town's ownership stops, at the edge of the right of way. But now if you extend the B box back, then you could have several feet of copper line that's on private property, but it's still on the main side of the B box. So then
Town's
it's
responsible.
yeah. So this was at 3:30 today, so we just kind of got some ideas going. But I think if this is an open document that's being worked on, and if we want to change anything, now would be the time to get it in there so that we could kind of help ourselves in the future be able to service our water and sewer lines and not have to deal with NIPSCO gas and electric lines.
Most of our water mains are how far off the road? They're typically about
7 feet off the
7
back of the
feet.
curb.
So I think if we kept NIPSCO closer to the curbs, that would stay away from
Yeah.
The
our
problem is,
saddles, our
the
services.
problem is moving NIPSCO's main or their service connection, they've got the easement right off the, in the front of the property. Whereas before they used to have them in the backyards, well, now they're in the front yard, as you know.
Right.
So that's where it becomes problematic is, if we ever have to do service on our Buffalo box and the service connection, we're literally running right into NIPSCO's.
Sure, and I understand that, and I get that. I've seen in the, there's a subdivision out there that they ran the primary electric and a 4-inch gas main right between a water valve, an 8-inch water valve. That if we ever have to dig that up, that's just going to be a nightmare. And I brought that to previous town managers' attentions, and we've gotten nowhere with it. So at least we're getting somewhere.
Well, we had a meeting with NIPSCO
That's
today.
great.
I drug John into the meeting. I'm like, hey, you need to be here.
And I agree. I like Bobby's idea about adding the coupling, putting an extension
Yeah.
on, and then having
Yeah.
a coupling. But now you have a coupling.
Then
so
that's
if
what I
that
thought. Now
coupling
you have-
goes bad,
You have another fail point.
so now
of-
I'm going to go to a resident and tell the resident that, well, we're only responsible to the B box. I can shut the B box off, but you have to find a company to dig up that coupling that was
Right.
installed prior to installation.
I was never comfortable
with the coupling.
with the
or-
coupling.
yeah.
I think,
always
I
have
think the
one-
fewer the fittings, the
Yeah.
better.
Right.
That's always been my experience.
It's a good idea, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
And we even talked about maybe putting a sleeve across their easement, but
But
then
even this-
that's
that-
going to get clogged up and.
The subdivision control ordinance says where the water main should be. So if we want to move the water main back into the, so if we want to move it around, now would be the time. If we amend where.
Closer, maybe we move closer to the.
Yeah,
curb.
if we're going to move
Sure.
it, then we would have to amend the language in here so that when they do the engineering for their subdivisions or their site plans, they would read that, and, you know, so before we finalize this, I think we should NIPSCO was gonna go back and talk to the engineers and stuff and see if they had any ideas based on the feedback we gave.
And when
them.
are they gonna give you a response? Because we have to
Right.
vote on this, so when are they gonna come back and give any input after this meeting that we had? Are they like getting back to you guys within
I would
next
imagine
week?
they'll get back to us in short order, but I don't think there was a definite drop dead, we're gonna
Right.
get back to you, next week. But, they've been very accommodating in terms of, meetings and discussions. So they brought their whole team out here. We had a really good discussion this afternoon about that.
What lot width where it gets to be really problematic with water line, the gas line?
Well, it's not really the width, really. It's just you got from the back of the curb, you got a 10-foot parkway and a 5-foot city walk.
So you have
And
5 feet.
so you got 15 feet of right-of-way in the yard, and then beyond that, you got a 10 or 12-foot utility easement.
And it's just crossing that easement where it's become an issue.
And so nobody wants to go under the sidewalk, so then either you're back in the easement in the yard, or you're up in the parkway, but then where the laterals come off, that's where you run into trouble, is because somebody's lateral's got to cross somebody's main. And
Joe, can you help me, give me a little bit like a view, test the wider the lot, like R1, wouldn't have a big problem as an R2. Would this be a problem?
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
So then R2 are really more problematic for the town than it is.
Well, I mean,
John was saying about crossing the utility.
Right, but I just-
There's a gas main in the parkway or on the backside of the sidewalk, then the water,
the width
water
really
guy
doesn't
putting it in.
do anything, because you could have a 8-mile wide lot, but you still have
That
the highway of mains in the front that you're trying to get the gas to the house, the water to the house, the sewer out of the house.
But the R1s, I'm getting an education here, okay? So bear with me. The R1 lots are different dimensions. The R2 kind of shorten it out, so that could be cause a problem, cause an effect.
The zoning ordinance says all lots are 100-foot wide at the building line.
Okay.
So the R1 would have an extra 5,000 square feet, and that would be, you could go wider than 100, but typically it's the depth. Is a perfect R1 lot is 100 by 200, 20,000 square feet.
Right.
R2 is 100 by 150, so 15,000 square feet.
So that cuts into the flexibility of an easement for, otherwise.
Right, but still, you still have 100-foot across the front, and then you got the 15-foot, which contains the parkway and the city walk,
Right.
and then the 12-foot easement behind it, where everything's running.
So that makes
And
it
then you're
more of a
trying to-
problem for the city to, if there's an issue.
Yeah, and back in the day, electric was all in the back.
Right.
Ran it through the
Yeah.
back, which wasn't a problem for us. It was a problem for them, because now they're tearing people's fences down and moving sheds. And that's why they said, it's bad public relations, and I think that's what they said in the meeting. When you gotta go tear someone's fence down to go work on the neighbor 2 doors down, And,
I know it happens,
and that's why I think they made the decision to shift everything to the front and put it in along the easement, along the front of the property.
Gas and electric.
Yeah.
yeah, but-
So now in everybody's front yard, you have gas, electric, water, sewer, and storm line. So you have
And
5
cable.
utilities
And
vying.
streetlights.
Oh, yeah, and
Streetlights.
streetlights, yeah.
So.
So you have 6
Yeah,
different lines
there's
vying
some-
for a 20-foot, 25-foot strip of land.
I'm sorry, in the back, I can understand the easement, because we had an issue with that, when they had an issue with their, line, and they were told, hey, listen, we either have to tear down your, fence here. Then I said, you could go on my property, go ahead, dig it out, and it's okay. But, it's told right off the bat that the easements are, be careful, don't put anything around there. So the courtesy of NIPSCO telling us that, that's nice, but the reality is the responsibility of those individuals who live there to basically say, you know what, if we want to put a little barn here, you better remember that in case something happens, you got to move it out. So it's a nice courtesy that they're doing, but at the same time, we have to figure out, if we put everything up front, it's more troubling and more of an eyesore for the town to basically, if something does happen. So I think it'll give us a chance to look at this and perhaps talk a little bit more about this issue here.
Probably what, guys, refresh my memory, John and Bob, but wasn't it like 5 to 10 years ago, NIPSCO was wanting to put their electrical boxes in the parkway, and I know St. John was.
Yeah, that was just
not
that was when
wanting
they,
it.
I believe it was phase 1 of the preserves in 17 or 18, and that was kind of that was their subdivision in St. John, at least, that they basically said, we're going in the front or else we're not installing the utilities. And I know Jack Slager was against it because he said, we're going to build these high-end homes.
You're right.
And now you're going to look at a green transformer, right alongside the driveway in the front yard. And so they wanted them in the back as well for the aesthetics. But, they ended up putting it in the front. And
In the
from
gates? Or
No, the preserves.
Preserves
yeah.
also,
They
okay.
are in the front there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
mainly all new subdivisions now are in the
Yeah,
front?
and everyone after that, that's kind of been, and I know with the previous town manager, even though our subdivision control ordinance says the gas and electric shall be in the rear yard, I know they had some meetings with NIPSCO back then, and I don't know, I wasn't involved with those, but I know whatever became of it was they got to go in the front yard, despite what our subdivision control ordinance
They
said.
have a monopoly, right? So
Yeah.
they get to do whatever they want.
Golden rule.
And they're not afraid to exercise that
That's right.
authority.
That's right.
And their thing about putting them on the parkways was, damage from plowing and everything else that
Right.
goes along
Yeah.
with that. So, and I don't think we want them out in the parkways either, so.
We want them in the rear.
Yeah. Well, we want them out of the way, and
Yeah.
obviously that's becoming an issue for them.
Aesthetically.
I don't see a big deal for the plumber to cross the lines, but if you guys are fixing your water or sewer and they run in the same trench, then it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Then it will be a
Because now you
big
gotta
deal.
fight with it.
Yeah.
You got electric line and you got a gas line in the same.
Anything
And a lot of their stuff's
Trenches.
backfilled with sand.
Yeah.
So then when you're trying to excavate it up, the sand's undermining and sliding in on you, and that's no
It's a
good.
Yeah.
Safety hazard.
And that's where I could see the issue is they get too close to your water or your sewer.
Or the gas line. They did.
Crossing it, I don't see a big deal, but, because they're usually, 3 feet deep? And your services are,
They're pushing
5 feet?
4, I'd say now,
4
where
feet?
they're at, and then
Yeah.
ours are at 5. Yeah.
They're at like 4 and 36, I thought he said.
Closer towards the home probably would, further away from our
Yeah.
buffalo boxes would probably be the best option, but, because I don't see them leaving the front yards.
And then they were supposed to work on too, that, I said how they do an as-built for every subdivision, which shows the location, all that. So if you could even, since the 2 B boxes are typically split at the property line, if they could go to the other property, because every other property line would have B boxes, the other one would have nothing. So if they put their transformer or their utility box,
Right.
and they leave the property line with the B boxes alone, then they could get, some room there where you're not underneath the
Yeah,
transformer
right.
working on a B box
Put water service on north side, electric
on the south
transformer south
property
side,
line.
or
Yeah.
east-west, however it works out, yes.
So I think, John, basically, you work with the Bob and Sergio, and kind of come up with how we're gonna incorporate that into this. What's the
Okay.
best plan of action?
Yeah, we could do that.
And that way, we can revisit that. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get it into this revision, but if we can, great. If not, that's fine too.
Come see me tomorrow.
Okay.
Would you mind, if you have a meeting with them, would you mind if I attend so I could see what's going on?
Joe, I wasn't even invited.
No? Well, I think this is,
Hey, I literally went and said, "Hey, John, come here." He's like, "Oh, what?" Because he's on his way out the door.
That was a minute too slow.
Yeah.
I don't see Attorney Nathan. Should we do a tour of one of these lots and Come back and,
Come
sure.
back.
Let's take a field trip.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other questions? Utilities amendment? Okay. Next item, Suncrest Church, proposed amendment to the Gates PUD to allow a secondary church place of worship in 2 proposed commercial buildings within a portion of pods 3, 7, and 17.
Yes.
Good, I was gonna say good morning, good evening.
Good evening. So hopefully we won't keep you here that long. We do know that Nathan is about halfway here, so he will be joining us very soon.
Talk
So
slowly.
thanks for your patience. So I know there's some information that was included in a packet that you guys have available. We appeared before this commission at the study session in April and talked through some of these things. Then we're given a little bit of homework that would be helpful for this commission, and so we're back tonight to present those items to you as well. And so I do have one individual with me. One of those items would be kind of a financial spreadsheet, and so
Yes, when we appeared before you guys in April, there were several items that, obviously the commission was wanted to get more information about, and
I'm sorry, just for the record, can you?
yeah, Brad
state-
Lambert, I'm a member at Suncrest Church, and
Got his fingers in everything.
see me around. But one of the issues that the town wanted to just was concerned about, of course, was the financial impact of changing that pod from the R2 PUD current zoning status to a different zoning status, and then of course to have a church facility be a large part of that new zoning status. As you are aware, that we are currently proposing a mixed use for that parcel to be church and commercial buildings, where we are hoping to create we'll call it, I have it called Suncrest Plaza on the sheet there. So where a portion of it is going to be a fairly large commercial real estate for lease, for profit complex there, where it would be leased for commercial tenants, and for anything from, that would be allowed under the town's current C2 zoning. And what I did here was we essentially put together a spreadsheet that looked at the 2 different scenarios and what the tax revenues would be to the town under the R2 PUD zoning that the current parcel is drawn and shown as, versus what we would be proposed a C2 commercial zoning that would incorporate obviously the church and the commercial buildings. The math that was performed here was just simple in taking the square footage of the proposed buildings that we have, and coming up with an assessed value per unit. And if you look at actually page 2 of this this tax analysis, is actually a snip of the actual assessed value from Summerwinds Plaza, which is a very similar type of development that we just did in Cedar Lake. So that shows how the Lake County Assessor assessed the new commercial in Cedar Lake. That would be, again, very similar to what would be done on this plaza here. So that kind of gives some background, and that these numbers weren't simply pulled out of thin air, that they're based on a very new and recent development here in South Lake County, just down the street in Parrish.
Real quick question.
Yeah, Joe.
With respect to the lot itself, is there any consideration to having that lot separated out by pins for the commercial portion, and then having the institutional use as a separate parcel?
Yeah, so I mean,
the only reason I would ask that is because obviously there's tax exempt status on one, and it might alleviate a lot of problems in terms of TIF dollars and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, certainly that was what we thought too, was that a two-lot subdivision would really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, with Nathan being here, we were hoping Nathan would be able to talk to with.
Yeah, and I didn't want to preempt that, but
No, right.
I don't want to lose
Yeah,
sight of that
but
question.
certainly that's exactly what we were thinking too. And of course, from our standpoint too, you know, we are going to be, you know, treating the commercial portion of that as a separate thing anyway. It's not
Right.
going to be part of the church, the other church being a nonprofit, this being for-profit, so.
But this answers the question that was raised at the last meeting when we discussed that. You know,
Yes.
What's the impact going to be, and this definitely answers that question, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and so to your point, as it, you know, being, that would be an individual lot with a different PIN number, and obviously the tax revenues that are associated with those commercial buildings would also fall under the TIF status for, which you already have for that parcel. So that then, of course, makes it a, you know, a 100% pass-through directly to the town. I'm not exactly sure about this, but from what I could tell, that if it were to remain an R2 PUD, that the tax revenues would be broken up, you know, into different percentages, with the revenue having to be shared with the county and the schools and the other things that normally go in with residential taxes. And again, not an attorney, don't know the specifics of it, but there is, from what I understand, you know, additional negative effects of having R2 within a TIF district, and that some way, somehow prevents you from gaining the full percentage on adjacent properties. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know the details. But what these two boxes essentially say, that, you know, over a 10-year period, that the tax revenues generated based on the square footages here, and you can see the assumptions that are at the bottom of the tables there, with a 2% annual increase in the assessed value, and the actual 3% maximum for commercial property, that the, you know, over a 10-year period, those commercial buildings alone are going to generate, you know, $1.2 million in revenue for the town.
For the town?
Yes.
Or for the school district? And
No,
so-
just 100%, $1.2 million to the town of St.
The
John.
revenue, the increment will be captured by the town.
Okay.
Yeah, and because there is no other, I mean, it's vacant land right now, it's farmland, the increment's almost 100%.
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, you know, again, if in the table below, you see where the 10-year total for the residential real estate, and again, being subject to sharing with the other entities, that the total tax revenue there would only be $130,000. So it's a, you know, from a financial standpoint, it seems to be, you know, a pretty obvious. It's a 10x win for the town to have that property be generating commercial type revenues.
So Brad,
tax
on the
revenues.
pro forma, I don't know how involved you were on making this, but with respect to the assessed value, you're looking at like 5.1 in year 4, which it would be fully assessed at that point. With respect to that, can you kind of go through where you came up with that number?
Okay.
I know you said it was based on the square footage and a similar property out in Cedar Lake. I mean, is that where you're kind of deriving that number? I just wanted to make sure I
Page
understood.
on, Joe?
Yeah, so if you see up
on
in the
the
box
profile.
above where I've got,
The chart here, he's got 5.1 million assessed value in year 4.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be fully assessed at that point. And
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that that's where we're getting the numbers. It's based on the square footage that
Yeah.
we're proposing.
and so we're taking, so you're in 2024, you know, we're calling that, I have 2 year zeros there. Essentially what that means is, you know, 2023 being complete planning stage, 2024 being continuing planning stage, and then 2025 we have some actual construction happening there, and then a possible assessment in 2025 for whatever portion of the project's done at that time.
So
And then-
in terms of full disclosure, are you going to be the commercial developer on this property and you don't have to tell me, but I'm just curious to know, or is there another partner that the church is considering? for
No, the answer is
commercial-
no. I mean, this is 100% in a volunteer
Yeah. And
capacity
you
here.
mentioned that, that's
Yeah.
why just wanted to ask for full
And that's one
disclosure.
thing, and the church, I had, I'm completely, this is uncompensated, completely volunteer in my work and helping out the church with this. It's just, I happen to have been through this
Once or
recently.
twice, yeah.
A couple, at St. John, somewhere in St. John, we're doing
It
this
was a
too.
year
so-
process, right?
Yeah, so we are familiar with it, and that's kind of where, I did create this tax analysis as you see it on the sheet there, so that is my work. And that $125, if you look at the table above, per square foot, that's exactly what they came up with the assessment down in Summerwoods Plaza in Cedar
Yeah,
Lake.
yeah.
So that's not my number, that's the Lake County Assessor's number. And that's why I provided that table on the second page here, that if anybody were wanting to dive into it, they could see that the numbers do actually check out there. But, so this was just one portion of, of the homework that we were kind of suggested to do and bring back to the commissioners to kind of help us all maybe understand a little bit better where we're headed with this parcel and why it makes sense to, if we could, to go ahead and develop this parcel with that in mind. We also, part of the packet there, you'll see we do have a more developed version of the site plan, which kind of shows that the parking and how we, broke up the parking lots, a little bit of better idea of the architectural nature of the church building. And we don't have any renderings for that, of course, because, that's really something that's a little bit further down the line here for us. The commercial buildings is something that are going to be very similar would be similar in appearance and facade as you see in Summerwinds Plaza, or you will be seeing in St. John Commons here, quickly with, of course, all brick fronts and a, ephes, front on the stores and the modern looking canopies, et cetera. So, but those are details that we'd be able to provide in the future, but we wanted to show a little bit further how that parking lot would look, and we break it up with the landscaping islands that are shown in there now. And, that the other things in that drawing being that, we would certainly, one of the things that was discussed was possible access from, I don't know, what's the name of the street there to the, all the way to the east, Jamie? That dead ends into it?
Right where the cursor is? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, Nathan.
Sir.
You're late.
Yeah, so that, that was one thing that we had talked about was, the commission had mentioned, maybe connecting through there, and that would just be something that, for us, that would just wipe out a lot of parking spot opportunity for us there. Plus, we don't believe that encouraging, it would be different if that road to the east, right, like dumped immediately out onto 231 or Klein or something, but that road actually goes back into the subdivision further, so there would be quite a bit of winding around and introducing additional traffic in a residential subdivision that we thought probably would not be looked on favorably. And then the third portion of what's in the packet there, we just have, going to print out the email that we received from the INDOT traffic engineer that we spoke to at the LaPorte office, where we sent him our preliminary site plan, or conceptual site plan there, and asked him, can you please help us out here, what it would look like for us to have an entrance off 231 to this
Are
parcel.
you asking for full access, or are you asking for right in, right out at that, or is
No,
that?
that's full access. So the road, Joe, is here showing turning lanes, showing, XL and decel lanes.
Yeah.
So there would be a widening of 231 at that, obviously, and just very similar to what's going on in the front of St. John Commons on Calumet Avenue. So,
Yeah.
we were not informed of any inhibitions in terms of the ability to have an entrance where we had shown there. That he didn't he didn't express any concerns with Park Place. Now, as the commission here knows very well, that there's the roundabout construction that's going to be happening at Parrish and Klein. I think that's would only going to help the situation there. As that road,
Are you gonna have an eastbound left turn in?
we would have an eastbound turning lane in the center, correct? So there would be a right-hand pass lane going eastbound. So anything eastbound that's turning into the church, right, is stopped in a center turning lane. So those are the three things that we brought
But
back
you
to the
did
package.
say full access out of the church parking lot onto 231. You can go either direction.
Correct. Yep, and we took out, from the last time we had that, we actually had another entrance right in, right out, like right in front of the commercial area
Yeah.
there. But we took that out and, we're all, there would just be a single entrance. But based on the traffic engineer's recommendation to, not create further congestion.
Oh, I can see that much better on there, Jenna, sorry.
Yeah.
You're at the left turn lane.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah,
there you
I
go.
couldn't see it on this one, it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of blended in with those lines. At the bottom, it's more of a sketch, but,
And I got a question again on the residential aspect of this, because it looks like there's some residential dollars that are gonna be considered on this thing. Where exactly are you looking for on that?
right, the residential is what it's currently drawn
That's the
as.
current impact.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
I
if
got
it were
you.
developed.
Thank you,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
that clarified, because I'm like, wait a minute. I heard you say mixed use, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here.
No,
Okay.
the existing proposed plan, as it stands right now, has about 28 residential lots
Okay.
on there. So.
So that's the total dollars right now, if nothing was done on it.
Correct. That's what we've proposed there. And I think the other item that's not taken into account, Mr. Wiswati, is the fact that if that were to be developed residentially, there's a significant additional cost that's added to the town when it comes to the maintenance of the roadways, when it comes to the maintenance of the sewer infrastructure, all of that. And that cost is relieved if we were to put in something that's similar to the proposed project. Another consideration is, well, what about tap-ons for utilities, things of that nature? Well, even if you have commercial infrastructure and you have not-for-profit infrastructure, those entities still need to pay that to the town. I guess we'd have to run a study on water consumption,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the other item that actually Mr. Lambert and I took a look at, we were talking about is, and I remember someone on the commission last or 2 months ago saying that's a lot of parking. And we started counting out, if the whole thing was developed commercially as well, it's about an equal distant amount of parking if one were to map it out with the square footage, depending upon the type of use that's required. So even if this was all commercial, so to speak, that number of parking would be about equidistant right there.
Just a couple other things that I had as far as, on-site detention, retention, anything like that. Is there, I don't know what the requirements are on that, but has that been considered as into this, or is that all gonna be underground?
So we do have the ability to tap on to other retention areas. So,
Actually, it was the retention pond directly to the north, Joe, is.
That's a lot of blacktop, and that's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
well, it's actually that detention pond is designed, and we'd of course get verification and proof of that from our engineering firm, that pond is ample in volume to accept all of our stormwater. And that was part of kind of one of the things that was part of the deal that was made when this happened, was that, we were assured and given, that's one of the reasons that the land was so appropriate value for us, because, if there had to be a retention pond to take all of our, then the parking goes way down, the parcel shrinks, and we necessarily don't have a good reason to move.
Right.
Because we won't have the parking.
Right, you're at 997 parking spaces.
Yeah, yeah, so we needed to be right around 1,000, if you add in the commercial component next to it, which, we are gonna have a shared parking agreement as part of the, thing between the two parcels. So, we will have, ample parking with the growth we want to say there. And I just wanted to go ahead and turn it over to Attorney Viss here, because there are, the technical matters that were, is one of the reasons we had to appear, or that we needed to start with the Plan Commission to begin with, regarding, how do we move this from the current, PUD R2 part of the Gates annexation agreement, all those things to the next step, and so.
No, appreciate that, Brad, and thanks to the commission for moving us around this evening. I was double booked at 2 plan commissions, so thank you for moving us around. I don't want to be redundant, just a couple things that I will touch on. Preliminary conversations with some traffic folks have indicated a great hesitancy to connect the residential unit across the back, just from the traffic flow that's there, as well as there was questions raised as to when, say, for example, church does let out on Sunday, does that suddenly lead to a huge influx through that residential area? And that's actually one of the reasons why the church is so strongly considering moving. The existing location where they started about 2 decades ago worked, because at that point, after having started in a congregant's backyard, they're exceeding about 650 just St. John residents alone that are attending church services. And it's causing on Sundays quite a bit of traffic flow and parish on that portion. And that's one of the reasons. The second reason, probably the biggest reason, is when the site was originally designed, it wasn't anticipated that the growth of the church would explode that much in 2 decades. And if you look at an overview of where the center of the church is, which is where worship happens on Sunday, it's backed up against the residential area to the south. And as they've grown, they've surrounded with classrooms and offices, and there's no room, candidly, to enlarge that auditorium at this point without just completely demolishing classrooms and the like, and it just doesn't make sense. So both from a sense of having outgrown the existing location, number 2, moving to a location that's better from a traffic flow perspective. And I think the third reason why this is a great development is this is kind of the entryway into the 231 overlay corridor for St. John. What it's providing is, in essence, what I would call an anchor tenant, the church, that has shown to be able to draw not only folks on Sunday, but as well continuously throughout the week. And what that provides then is, in addition to the traffic flow that we all know is already existing on 231, it provides a draw for those businesses that we know will then occupy that 31,000 square feet of commercial space. So in essence, it creates already a draw there. It's a beautiful, wonderful addition as you enter St. John from the east going west. I think it's going to be a magnificent building that they would eventually propose once they invest the dollars into designing it. And like I mentioned, it just provides an anchor of stability at that entry point into St. John. It's also been asked as to, what other additions does a church of this size offer to the community? I'm not sure if the 2 men before me touched on it, but they donate 10% of their budget every year to the community. This past year, that's $260,000. They've implemented a St. John Day of Caring. Many of their members are active on various boards here in town, just very, very active, from sponsoring a wide variety of groups to use their facility. I know Pastor Jamie gave me a list, and it was astounding, the groups. St. John Police Department, INDOT, Habitat for Humanity, NWI Food Bank, Down Home Syndrome Association of NWI, just to name a few. So it's more than just Sunday. It's being used throughout the week. It is a significant, significant draw. So, and as Mr. Lambert started with, when we ran the numbers, it's just astounding as to what a development of this magnitude can offer to the community. I mean, once that commercial section is built out and we place it within that TIF district, it's going to give the town the capacity to capture just the next 10 years $1.2 million, which is significant. I'm not sure what your budget is, but that's a significant addition to any municipality. And I think it'd be a wonderful addition to St. John. And the majority of the improvements here, if not all, would be borne by the church and the development. It would enhance 231. And just to circle back to where we began, a couple of months ago, the question was, is this a prudent, good use of our overlay corridor? And for the reasons that we've discussed this evening, I'd strongly believe that it's a welcome, strong, good planning. That's a welcome addition to this area. I will entertain any questions. I know there's a lot of good questions that were raised after our last meeting.
For me, I'm concerned for the entrance onto 231. We have Park Place, we have access to Park Place, two different spots. I just don't, there's a lot of traffic on 231, there's gonna be a lot more. Having full access onto 231, I think it's a mistake, since we're so close to Park Place. Like I said, you got two entrances and exits off of Park Place, just, that concerns me. And is this, question is this, for our overlay district for 231, is this the best option? Yeah, I don't want to stifle growth for church. I mean, amen, if the church can attract people, hey, I'm all for it. But is this the right option for our 231 overlay district? Yeah, it's currently zone R2 PUD. So we could change that to commercial, right? If the request was made. Right.
And I do appreciate the fact that they will bring money in, but I agree with him that the traffic right there on 231, it's going to be pretty tough. And the more you grow, more power to you, but then you got traffic. I think we could see that right on 93rd, what transpired, and so we have to look forward, we have to look ahead as to what can we do, or what can you do to alleviate that. Although you may be talking about Klein Avenue may have a roundabout, which is great. That's one of the best traffic solutions we have, but still you have that section on 231. I turn going to the YMCA over there, and there's a bottleneck.
Park Avenue and 231's a dangerous intersection as it is right now. Getting out of Park Place onto 231 to go, east is tough and dangerous. Adding that, full access at that point, and I agree with you guys that is problematic. So, I mean, I definitely would want to look at a traffic study to see if that's
Traffic signal at Park Place or something, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that. We've talked about putting in another fun go-around circle there. And we talked with a developer and another developer about that as an option. We talked about traffic signal there, so, I mean, it's been in discussion for a while, and we'll continue to have those talks, but yeah, I mean, I understand the reasoning for wanting a full access, because getting out of here after church is over is not going to be fun.
Well, and I think
it's not going to be a holy land.
It's not fun. I mean, if you've been to St. John the Evangelist, it's not fun either. So,
well, hopefully their patience is lessened.
But there's
after.
a traffic light
Yeah.
whatever that North-South Street is.
But I guess a question that I would have for the commission is the town has implemented this entire section with the hopes of it developing to be commercial. So whether you have a church or whether you have a school or whether you have commercial, there's going to be traffic. It's just here the generation source is a church versus a commercial entity, a Starbucks or other entities. So I think when it comes to the traffic question, I think it should be geared in the direction of what does good traffic management require or suggest, not saying we can't have this because it's a church and it's going to be a flood at one point. So my suggestion would be, if we're going to move in the direction of the traffic question, perhaps the next step is going to be, what does a traffic engineer indicate? We've already heard from INDOT saying their suggestion would be both the double ingress and another one. But my suggestion would be, if we're going to continue this dialogue, opportunity for resolution here is the traffic management question is what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Well, and the second one was, is this the right fit for our overlay district? That's probably the biggest.
Right.
And to that, Mr. Commissioner, the other item I meant to mention before is anytime that you abut commercial to residential, there's always the question of how do you alleviate the zone in between, right? And when I look at something like a church like this, in my mind, that creates almost a buffer zone in between the residential area and the commercial area. And I think that's really what this proposed design enables, is kind of a soft buffer zone as you transition from the residential. I'm sure that the residents behind it would appreciate that versus a complete commercial build out. So this in essence softens the two of them.
This entire parcel, is it owned by one entity, one owner? Or is it
Yeah,
multiple?
the church owns the entirety of it.
Oh, the church does, okay.
Yes, yep.
And we did talk about, before you got here, just having the commercial areas replatted, subdivided, two parcels.
It would be, and if I could step over, I could show you in essence. In essence, be this area right here, all of this.
Squared off. I got you. Makes sense.
Yep.
Any other questions, concerns? Yeah. Yep, yeah, come on up.
I wanted to add an additional comment. One thing that we had discussed, Nathan, previous was at this kind of stage of the ballgame, what would, wanted to ask Attorney Decker if there would be, how much of a hurdle would it be to move this from the existing R2 PUD and with the existing annexation agreement, would it make sense to carve this parcel out of the gates of St. John and actually make it a separate two-lot subdivision now that stands alone by itself? How much how much is involved in that from a technical standpoint, and does that then affect the annexation agreement? And how far do we get off in the weeds there? I guess when I'm just asking from a technical standpoint, if that's something we should be thinking about and bringing up for discussion at this point now as well.
So Mr. Chairman, I've communicated with Mr. Viss about this, and as I see this, there's a couple of things before we ever get to subdivision or the platting of a subdivision. At this point, we're still looking at the annexation agreement and zoning commitments that were executed by the owner of the overall Gates of St. John back in 2005. And part of that document limits the number of churches in the gates. And so at this point, that will have to be considered and possibly amended by the town council to allow a change in that document to allow for more than one church in the gates. That's something that would be taken up by the town council as far as its consideration of whether that's necessary.
And you said that was part of the annexation agreement?
It was. And the zoning
2005.
commitments, it's the annexation agreement and the zoning commitments that were essentially presented and agreed upon by the town council at the time this property was annexed and became the Gates of St. John, annexed into the town. It was not done in the traditional sense as far as a zone change where it's considered by the Plan Commission, and then ultimately recommendation is made to the town council. That was all not done at that time. It was simply, it came in, it was annexed, and at the same time it was given this zoning classification which identified all of these different pods. But back to my earlier point, that would have to be considered by the town council to allow more than one church. As far as the zoning is concerned,
Before you move on, who would do the petition to make the amendment?
I believe
We would.
the church.
Does he have the authority to amend their agreement?
So it's not, the town council has the authority to, I believe, make.
Unilaterally?
approval. I do. I don't know that it requires anything by the original developer to.
Okay, I just want to get clarification on that.
I believe
yeah.
the town council has legal authority to consider those zoning commitments that were presented. The annexation agreement is not the focus. It's what were the commitments that were made at the time the annexation occurred, and whether the town is willing to consider any changes to those commitments that were made at that time.
Would the commitment have to be performed by the council, the
It
current
would.
council, before we even
Consider it?
consider even talking anymore?
Well, I don't know about that. I think that's one step in this process, and I'm trying to address Mr. Lambert's question. So,
And I'm not trying to just,
No, it's.
leave, you guys are done,
It's
I'm
something
not
that we've
having that
talked about,
attitude.
And with Mr.
Yeah.
Westland at town council level, this particular question.
yeah, as far as the zoning, so it's zoned, obviously PUD with all of these several pods, which give various different zoning classifications for those pods. And so what essentially needs to be done, because a PUD is a unique zoning classification unto itself. It's not something that we can look to the zoning ordinance to say, oh, this is commercial, here are what the standards are for, C1 or for C2 or for any other zoning classification. That's what makes unique, or PUDs so unique, is because it's a write-your-own zoning ordinance that was effectively adopted at the time it was annexed. So again, not going back into all of the details of what occurred 18 years ago, but it's essentially a change in the zoning classification, because we're changing what the original PUD ordinance provided. And so in that regard, I consider it to be akin to a zone change, a change in the zone maps. And the process to be followed for that is applications presented, the Plan Commission will consider that change in the zone maps as proposed by the applicant. The Plan Commission will make a recommendation or vote to make a recommendation, whether it's a favorable recommendation, an unfavorable recommendation, or no recommendation to the town council. So ultimately, the town council has the final authority as far as changing the zone maps within the town.
But the commitment would have to be done first.
Well, I don't have an opinion at this time about what comes first or second. I mean, I think certainly from the applicant's perspective, if it never gets past the town council agreeing to allow a second church as far as the changes to the annexation agreement and the zoning commitment, then it makes little sense for it to
Understood.
proceed with the zone change
Yep.
to allow for the uses that they've proposed. So that's all from a zoning perspective, and we haven't even gotten to the subdivision planning, which usually follows after zoning has been determined, so.
Then I got another question with respect to any deed restrictions on this property. If there's covenants, homeowners association or association, as it may be, how would that impact this whole thing? Because are we just allowed to say, okay, we can change that?
So number one is the prior owner, who is the developer, is the one that sold it to the church.
Right.
So there's been a strong indication there of willingness to work with, as it stands right now, would be a contributing member to the HOA. There's been some dialogue about perhaps carving it out, perhaps. It's because of the fact that it really doesn't add to anything that the HOA governs, maintains, et cetera.
Right.
But no, that is in the backdrop, and that's a part of the original annexation agreement.
Yeah.
As council's indicated, it was a very unique document that was entered into in 2005. I agree with him that the council has the right to unilaterally change it. In essence, it's now an ordinance of the town that was passed at that time, so they've got the right to change it. And as you point out accurately, is it the chicken? Is it the egg? And we've talked about it with council and with Mr. Westland, and we believed it was proper rather than just coming in and seeking a zone change, not saying what we're doing, I mean, not just going straight to C2, which allows for a church to instead share the vision of an existing good member of the community and say, we'd like to develop it in this fashion, get a temperature check, what else do we need to work on, so that we're all getting a good plan set together, and then collaborative, we were going to come to the Plan Commission and to the Town Council at the same time to request both the zone change and the modification to the annexation agreement to allow an additional church.
And, Joe, to address your question, so typically when you're talking about a declaration of restrictive covenants, that simply, those are simply what I would describe as burdens or certain requirements that the original owner of the property records in a document, typically a declaration of restrictive covenants, and typically you find certain restrictions contained in that document. Those restrictions can be anything from, I would say, the minimum square footage of a home, or things related to that. But those are those run with the land, and those are intended to be the restrictions imposed on any subsequent buyers of lots who plan to develop. And it can apply to commercial property as well. However, ultimately, the zoning classification, I would say, has more legal authority than what any restrictive covenants say. And I don't think there's any restrictive covenants that would ever trump or say, well, no, this is what the restrictive covenants are, therefore there cannot be a change in the zoning classification or change in the zone maps. That cannot be done because ultimately the authority vested in the town council to change its zone maps it cannot be in any way hindered by what some property owner included in restrictive covenants that were recorded prior to any of the development that occurred. So in my opinion, ultimately the restrictive covenants of the subdivision don't preclude or hinder the town council ultimately from considering any proposals that are being submitted by the applicant.
And that's a great point. And to that point, the town council has designated an overlay district in this area, in essence signaling a change of direction where they'd like to go. And part of that overlay district has indicated that churches and places of worship can indeed be allowed. Now it's by approval of this body, so to speak, but it was specifically included in that overlay district that places of worship were anticipated as a possibility with good planning being implemented before they were approved.
So what he's saying is if the zoning change went into effect, it's a by right use.
I'm sorry? If
the zoning was approved as C2, the church use is a by right use.
well, so again,
They wouldn't need a special use or anything like that.
I'd have to look at the zoning ordinance. I don't know that off the top of my head as far as the schedule of uses in the ordinance. If it's a commercial district or in the overlay district.
Permitted in C2, but I believe it's a special exception in the overlay.
Okay. So if it's a special exception in the overlay district, they would still have to apply for the special exception, which is something that's considered by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those are essentially uses that are permitted, but the Board of Zoning Appeals can impose reasonable restrictions on the use that it finds pertinent. So, right, if the proposed use as a church is a special exception under the schedule for C2, then that's the process. But
And Nathan, you said it's a by right use in the overlay?
In C2,
In
it's a by
C2,
right
I'm
use,
sorry.
but in the overlay district, it's a by permission.
special
Okay.
exception, yeah, that's what Jenna just.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
She talked so long.
I think
Sorry.
with where we're at is we're at a pivot point where a lot of dollars now need to be spent with design, with engineering, et cetera. So our goal this evening in the past meetings was to get a temperature check. Is this a project that we can collaborate on and plan together? Or is this going to be a no-go? Because the church wants to be a good steward of the resources that they've been entrusted to by their congregants. They do believe that we can participate well in the community at this particular location. It sounds like some traffic studies are in order to ensure that we're all on the same page and we can look our residents in the eye. And I guess my question would be, are there any other hurdles that we need to overcome or additional information that you'd like for us to bring back? Because next step is to approach the town council, the BZA, with a variety of petitions to keep this project moving forward.
Right, and I think maybe we could have a meeting between Adam, me, you, Sergio, just to kind of talk a little bit about the logistics on how we move forward with that. So I think maybe that's our next step in the process. But, you know, obviously we want to keep everything going and you know, until we get some solid answers for you, because I don't know. He just raised some very good points about this has to go to the council. There needs to be discussion. It's their determination whether, you know, that happens. And I'm not sure on the process how that gets petitioned to the town in order to make that happen. But I think that's our first step.
Town council?
I think so. I think so.
Then, Joe, you will let us know what happens.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, obviously, they're going to be back here, you know, before you guys again, but we just want to make sure we're doing step 1, step 2, step 3, and not step 3, step 2, and step 1, and going backwards.
So next step, collaboration on.
Yeah, I say set up a meeting. Sergio's not going to be here, though, next week. Adam, do you have any availability next week? We can have Jenna. She can be there. She'll fill in.
Yeah, just generally, I think I could do that next week. I can
Okay.
come over for a meeting.
Yeah, let's see if we can get that set up with Jenna.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And I already have spoken with Mr. Westland, who's counsel for the town council on this, and he's in agreement with what Adam and I have spoken back
Yeah,
and forth
good.
on. There's a lot of different arrows, but I
Right.
think all three council are in agreement as to what needs to happen procedurally.
Yeah. I want to make sure we're getting it done in the right order.
Yep. Okay. I guess, are there any other concerns or pieces of information that this commission would want us to further investigate, discuss, assemble information for before we come back?
Not at this moment.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Motion to adjourn?